the money is available when it comes to revenue. It's not so much restricted. It is out there. There is money to be made. But now you need to be clever. You need to be innovative. You need to think not just outside the box, but what you do inside the box needs to be, you've been able to look at things in a 360 degrees angle.
Hello everyone, I'm your host Thomas. Welcome to episode 11 of the Digital Media Growth Podcast. Today I'm joined by Juliana Corentin. Juliana is the founder of JK Media and the editor-in-chief creative director for Mediatainment Finance. They're a publication that focus on bringing investors and the creative industry together. She started this herself and it's grown into a very interesting and successful venture. We go a lot into her story, some things we discuss, finding and focusing on an underserved audience, growing that audience through strategic partnerships, cultivating new revenue streams along the way, and being focused on a powerful overall theme. In her case, the value of creativity. I think there's a lot of great advice and possibly inspiration for would-be entrepreneurial publishers out there, people who would like to start their own publication of some kind. I learned a lot and I hope you do too. Hello, Juliana. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. Looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too. So just to kick us off for this interview, would you mind just giving our listeners a little background about yourself and your career in the media?
Sure. The name is Juliana Corentin. I am CEO, founder of a company called JK Media Inc. It's a boutique entity which basically publishes magazines, has a photography design division, does a lot of consultancy in the media and entertainment space. We call ourselves a content creation agency. And the idea is to, on the one hand, in the case of the magazines, we target decision makers who are interested in the value of the creative sectors, whether it's the actual creation itself or the distribution with technology. And it ranges from anything like music, film, television, games to fashion, architecture, the arts. So basically, value in the creative sectors, basically, and we look at it internationally too. So that's the gist of what I do. In terms of background, I did the master's degree in journalism at Northwestern in Chicago. I'm a Brit. I'm based in London born and bred, but I saw an opportunity to basically broaden my horizons when I learned about that course. It has been invaluable to me ever since because it was very highly disciplined. And it led to chances to write for the national newspapers in Britain. I was a correspondent for Time magazine. I've also ended up actually selling my own publication. There was a title called New Media Age, which was one of the first titles to look at what people were doing with the internet in the media, as opposed to the internet as a technology platform, and the businesses that the internet was generating as a result. And I've since also been a correspondent or a section editor for titles like Billboard magazine, The Hollywood Reporter, Advertising Age, and even done some TV production for Sky TV in the UK.
Since you focused quite early on the application of the internet to the media, what do you consider in that time frame since that began the most significant changes that you've seen occur between the relationship between the internet and the media?
I'm sure you've heard this before, but certainly the ability of the consumer, so whether it's the reader or the viewer, to actually participate in the, should I say, discussions, the creation of the the media or the entertainment. That had never happened before. You may have aspiring singers, filmmakers, artists doing their own thing in their own homes, so maybe they found a professional and commercial opportunity. But the idea is that, for better or for worse, anyone can actually say, oh, okay, I've got something I want to share with the world. And without having to effectively buy anything heavy or expensive, they're able to do so. That is mega. That is hugely significant. And the internet has made that happen.
So kind of like a democratization of creative tools.
I've always loved the use of that word, but with, sort of huge question marks. Yes, it has broadened the abilities for more people to participate in media and entertainment and publishing, etc. Whether it exactly enhances democracy, that's another debate, totally. But I know what you mean. Yes, it has broadened opportunities hugely, yes.
Tell me about Mediatainment Finance. What is it and why did you decide to start it up?
As a journalist, I did end up covering a lot of the, as you've noticed, my specialist areas in media and entertainment. So I would end up writing for, as I said, Billboard magazine about the music industry, or Hollywood Reports about the film and television, or the advertising industry. And one of the things I automatically picked up during my coverages were the fact that when it came to finding money to set up a record label or a film production company, banks were very, very wary. And they, to some extent, they still are. So in some ways, you needed to go to family and friends, or mortgage your house 3 or 4 times, and if you did find an investor, it was basically someone who was hoping that you become rich and famous one day, and that they could end up at the Oscars or the BAFTAs, so kind of a vanity investment. But when the technology came along and disrupted, for want of a better word, all these creative industries. So let's take example when Napster came along and showed the record labels that, hey, with technology, your fans can bypass paying for CDs. Now, the copyright and legal ramifications are another conversation. But in terms of practicality, that's what Napster showed, that you could actually access and enjoy and share music without having to pay for a CD. That totally, literally disrupted the music industry, and they found themselves on the back foot and didn't know how to respond. Before they knew it, they were suing their own fans, etc. However, one day I was attending a music industry event when I overheard an investor, not a record label executive or a fan, just purely someone looking to where to put his money. And I overheard him say that the reason why he was interested in what was then called mobile music, this before Spotify came along, by the way, what he called mobile music, the reason why he was going into that sector was because the value of music was cheap enough for him to put his money there then. We're talking about 7, 8 years ago, put his money in there then. And then, because of the growth of mobile technology, watch the value of that music rise again. And I've never heard anyone put the value, I've heard people, industries put the value on the car manufacturing or the property development industry, but never on the creative industry. So I thought that was interesting. So I started looking into it and suddenly realized that he wasn't the only one. You had venture capital companies, you had private equity firms also looking to invest in music, television. People like the Alexander McQueens were showing that investors were also interested in the fashion design. And suddenly, the creative industries became big topics of conversations, not just within the industries themselves, but everywhere. And then governments suddenly realized that the creative industries were also contributing significantly to their economies. And before I knew it, I thought, I'm going to actually follow the trail of where the money investors, with their influence on how the media and entertainment industry was going to develop, basically. And the end result is that following the money also meant that you had people who actually cared about the outcome because they wanted their money back. Okay? So before you knew it, you started hearing people were investing in games, and you discovered that the gaming, the video game sector is probably 3 times the value of Hollywood, if not more. And before you know it, investors are putting money in there. And they, as a result, because they wanted their money back, were making observations that the world in general, for want of a better phrase, wasn't noticing. And there, before you know it, esports emerged where video game fans were happy to pay to watch other fans compete against each other. That has since grown into potentially $1 billion industry today. And that's because it was enabled with investors putting money in video games and in the digital platforms that enabled fans to play those games and watch each other compete. And it's happening all over the place. So that's what Mediatainment Finance is about, following the money in the media and entertainment industry.
What were the first steps when you saw this underserved audience and decided to create something for them? What were the first steps you took, and what were the initial major challenges?
The world of publishing, eh? I started this around 2010 when the recession had hit, and in the 2008 recession had hit everyone. So what I found available on my computer at that time for free was Microsoft Publishing. So I decided to eventually just write everything myself, which required basically who, what, where, and when it comes to putting money in the various sectors in media and entertainment. And then would write profiles about the major companies, which could be anything from Walt Disney to a startup in an Asian country. And then we'll spend long hours from 8 in the morning to 8 in the evening while also trying to earn a living, writing it up. And then basically had friends whose grasp of the English language were excellent to proofread them for me. So a combination of me doing the writing, then doing the proofreading, and Microsoft Publishing, putting it together, getting someone to put up a very basic website, and then making free versions available on the website, while through my experience and connections, setting up an email marketing version, so that with a controlled circulation. So that was then distributed into people's inboxes. And it was a combination at that time of basically advertising on the website version and then subscription and paid for versions for those who got it in their inboxes. So that was tough. That was, there were days, actually probably the 3rd or 4th day after I started, I remember thinking, what have you got yourself into? But then the recession had blighted media drastically, and that was my core skill, so I decided to pursue. And fortunately enough, at that time, the government certainly the UK government and increasingly a lot of European governments had declared the creative industries mattered. So I felt confident and encouraged enough to continue. And I also had some champions, some individual champions, one of whom, if he wouldn't mind me mentioning his name, Jeremy Silver, is currently the CEO of an organization called Digital Catapult, who encouraged me to continue, and he put me together with some tech startups in the creative industries who also wanted to learn from me about how the creative industries were. They were the tech experts. And they gave me an office to basically get started. And before I knew it, they were also doing very well. They were bought out by Apple for billions, well, not billions, but certainly millions. This startup specifically, it was called Music Metric at that time. And their encouragement was just phenomenal. So I encourage anyone who's actually doing anything like this. You do need a champion. You do need someone who has blind faith in you. And that's how it all got started.
It sounds like a very difficult project to get off the ground, a lot of work. You said you were working these crazy hours. If you had to sum it up in a sentence, what was your key driver or motivator?
Oh, that I had found a sector that did need cover. That it wasn't a waste of time. The idea of pinning down who was investing what and how much in the creative industries had suddenly begun to affect everyone. And when certainly the Apples and the Facebooks and the Googles also started investing in the creative industries, I knew I was onto something. So I just had to pursue. And basically, you do need to understand why the financial value matters. We're talking about job creation. We're talking about sustaining the different cultures wherever we live. And we're also now talking about providing the technology companies with valuable entities and ventures with which they can also reach their consumers. I hadn't seen it done anywhere else, even if the major newspapers and magazines, business magazines were covering them. It was the big companies like what the Walt Disneys and the Hollywood studios were doing. We cover it at the granular level as well. And it is increasingly becoming huge topics of debate at all levels. So yes, for me, it was pinning down that this needs to be covered.
You talk about reaching consumers and finding this underserved audience. In the earlier days, how did the marketing look? How did you actually go about reaching these people who were out there, your audience?
Thank you for bringing that. That's a very good point. It was finding champions. So I came across event organizers. There's a company called Two Pairs in the UK who organized a whole series of events which basically brought startups, especially tech startups, and investors together. And then they also hosted events. So basically, they made Mediatainment Finance and eventually its sister publication, Tech Mutiny, a media partner. And then, so that's how that marketing got done. So people will come across the two magazines, the branding, and then we'll start making inquiries about what we do and whether they needed it or not. And then soon that formed a partnership with the major Reed Medium events in Cannes, like Medium and MIPCOM, MIPTV, which were targeting the music industries, the film and television industries. And they also made Mediatainment Finance and Tech Mutiny media partners. And with that, we started also getting the international reach. So, and it's just niche. There's no two ways about it. The business development directors, possibly the CEO, but basically the people who are saying, where does our company go from here next? Because if we're going to expand, we're going to need the money. And if we're going to expand, we're going to need to understand who our competitors are, not today, but tomorrow. And thanks to digital technology, your competitor could come from anywhere. And as the TV industry discovered with Netflix, as the record labels discovered with Spotify, as the gaming industry, the traditional video game publishers suddenly found a new generation of competitors because esports had emerged as they saw it from nowhere. So we basically, our titles were branded by these events organizers whose conventions or shows were basically attended by delegates who were these decision makers who wanted to know where the future of their industries were going. And because now it's totally unpredictable. Digital technology will mean that your competitor can come from anywhere.
When did you realize that you were starting to get real traction with this? Was there a specific moment? When did you start? Did you get any kind of moment you were like...
Yes. The moment I went, yes. It was when ironically, the consultancy side of the business started to soar. Now, consultancy names that people have seen what Mediatainment Finance and Tech Mutiny are writing about, investigating, and analyzing, and wanted that expertise to help them make a decision as to where they're going forward. So without naming names, basically these companies could be anything from a film company that decides it wants to set up a music arm, or a record label that decides that it wants to form a partnership with an advertising agency because they feel that what they themselves are learning in the record labels, in the music industry, can offer a certain type of expertise to brand owners that wasn't available before. So they would bring us in to basically either do surveys looking at what users of their services are after, or sometimes they just want to create in-house content to target their clients or even in-house staff to make them understand how their company or their industry is developing. In the digital age, as we call it, it just isn't enough to tell your clients or your members of staff, your employees, this is what we're doing next. You need to bring them on board, and sometimes creating content in-house helps a great deal. So a lot of companies have invited us and employed us to do specifically that for them. And that's when we knew that what we were publishing, right? And don't get me wrong, we're no different from a lot of media publishers out there. It is hard work and it's a struggle to find the right business model. But these consulting clients confirmed that what we were writing about, what we were publishing, were needed assets. And that the first one was basically, I was on holiday when was in 2014 when a massive consultancy project came along, and I almost turned it down because I said, well, how am I going to do it? And at that time, I started collecting the help of freelance agents who would come in when the big projects came in. And I had to inform them that wherever they were, they may just have to put time aside to get this off the ground. Because once we got that done, that was in 2014, the holiday was just spent in internet cafes, getting this project off the ground. And the client was happy, and we just knew that we made decent money that year. And we just knew that as a company, what JK Media was doing in terms of the publishing, and now this extended skills into consulting because of the expertise we'd gained when it came to financing and the value of creativity, we were going to survive, so far anyway.
From the beginning, when you first started Mediatainment Finance, was that something that you anticipated, the fact that it would lead into this consultancy business, or was that an opportunity that you saw some way in?
It was an opportunity, definitely. There's no way I saw that coming. I was, like a lot of people, hypnotized by what bloggers were allegedly doing. You put something on your website and you make millions because you found the right brand partner or sponsor, etc. Well, the reality is a bit more complicated. Publishing is a word you used earlier on, been democratized thanks to online technology, which means that the competition is now a million times bigger than it was before the internet. It would have been before the internet became available everywhere. So the money is available when it comes to revenue. It's not so much restricted. It is out there. There is money to be made. But now you need to be clever. You need to be innovative. You need to think not just outside the box, but even what you do inside the box needs to be you being able to look at things in a 360 degrees angle. When the consultancy side came along, in some ways, we saw the clients as a kind of an ambassador for the Mediatainment Finance brand. So it wasn't just the fact that there was another opportunity for revenue making, but we knew that the value, talking of value again, the value of our brands, including Meditainment Finance, also needed to be sustainable. And when these consultancy projects came along, we just realized that here was an opportunity for these clients to also become the ambassadors of Meditainment Finance. And as I said, added later, Tech Mutiny to the sister publication.
As far as the magazine itself goes, I see that you have a subscription page up here. Have you kind of experimented a lot over the time with different subscription models or different revenue models? And what have you found from that?
What I've learned from that is the average human being, which is our target, ultimately our target audience, will go for, if they can find the same thing for a cheaper price, you can bet your life that's what's going to happen. And in addition to our publications, there are other relevant, hundreds of other relevant publications out there. So why should they choose us, basically, is the question we've had to ask ourselves. What will happen is that we'll try one model, and we do both subscription and advertising. So we'll try one model, and there's a combination of both. And if that doesn't work, we're quite open about it. We'll change it. We are fortunate enough to have a core number of subscribers who, in some ways, every time they repeat, it's not just the fact that we need to make sure that we don't let them down, but it's a real boost that somebody needs us. It's going to be loved, whatever you do. So, and with that, their faith in us is such that if we then turn around, which we're about to do soon, and say, look, we've learned that there's a demand for something, a greater demand for something, and a lesser demand for something else, we're about to make changes. We'll consult them, we'll let them know, and then ask them whether they still want to be involved. So basically, we need to find more hours within the day to not just try to bring in new users, new readers, new subscribers, but to also have a conversation with existing subscribers, existing readers, and basically hope that by the time those conversations are over, there are more of them. As I said, it isn't easy. We definitely need the opportunities that the consultancy side has come to bring in revenue. And every time we expand, for instance, we're about to totally relaunch at the end of this year to get ready for 2020. That requires expenditure. That requires costs. Every time we do that, we need to find a way of making money wherever we can. So ideally, subscription and advertising should cover everything. But in the real life, we do need the consultancy side as well. And we hope that whatever it is that we learn from the coverages, the industries we cover, and how we cover them, does really feed. We're offering a genuinely substantial service to the consultancy clients. So they become symbiotic. They do need each other. And at the moment, it's working so far. And hopefully, it'll work in the long term.
Interesting that word symbiotic, because I suppose that the two sides are essentially selling the same expertise in just a different way.
Absolutely. In some ways, though, you could argue that in case of the consultancy, what Meditainment Finance and Tech Mutiny offer to readers, they get a bespoke version. In addition to offering them knowledge and information about what's going on in the sectors that they're interested in, we need to tailor it to what their own goals are. And that's, in fact, where the real hard work comes in when it comes to consultancy side. But at the end of the day, what we feel our readers are discovering and what the consultancy clients need is that the creative industries, their impact and influence has always been huge. In the past, we used the word culture, and it's so relevant. And in some ways also they tended to be hugely supported by chunks of a government budgets as well. That's where we put our museums, that's where we get our parks, heritage sites, etc. You can't have your citizens attend these museums, attend these heritage sites, etc., without being influenced. And among those influences are young kids who want to one day grow up to become musicians, to become music executives, to become filmmakers, to become painters. And they need to earn a living. They create jobs so that people earn money. At the end of the day, we're just talking about the human cycle. The creative industries are core to in everyday living, and someone needs to provide that service, and someone is consuming that service. We are saying that as Mediatainment Finance, that service has a financial value, not just a cultural or some kind of a heritage value. It's a financial value that matters to the country's economies, etc., etc. And we will provide the platforms where you can discover how that value is shaping your sector, your respective creative industry, and how that is influencing the evolution, and in some cases, the revolution of those sectors. And for that, and also, let's be frank, investors are also looking for new opportunities of where to put their money. And the combination of creativity and technology has provided some of the greatest opportunities that never existed before the internet.
I like the way your brand and I assume your content is kind of based on the way you've been describing it, almost a philosophical or cultural idea. This must help you in defining exactly who you are and what you cover and where you're going.
Oh, absolutely. And life being what it is, there are some challenges. I remember telling an old university friend about both Mediatainment Finance and Take Mutiny. And as someone who has nothing to do with media, is purely a mate who was looking at what I was doing, said, "Oh, have you noticed how some of the things that you're writing in the technology magazine are creeping into Mediatainment Finance, which is supposed to be focusing purely on creativity?" And he says, "Do you ever see it one day sort of melding and becoming one title?" I thought, oh, good Lord, I haven't thought about that. But then I took a step backwards and realized that, no, what technology does is totally separate from what the things that, my definition of creativity is that if you took away the technology, it will still be doable. Okay, and that's where culture comes in. Okay, so yes, I agree, and you hit the nail on the head about having that philosophy. And that, I must admit, is my job. In some ways, a lot of the people who work on the titles, it's literally a job. At the end of the day, we move on kind of thing. But for me to ensure that the brand value is maintained, yes, that you're right. I do need to understand the difference between what we call creativity and the creative sectors and what we call the technological aspects and developments that are driving the development in the creative sectors. So yes, as a result, yeah, I am aware of that there are some innovators in creativity, but that's got nothing to do with culture, or rather nothing to do with commerce, rather, I should say. And that raises a challenge when we write about that. Is there a financial value? If the person creating it has a mission, which could be political, which could be social. So those challenges can affect what Mediatainment Finance actually does. But first and foremost, it's who's putting money into creativity and why. Because we're presuming they've done their due diligence before they make that commitment.
You mentioned that you're gearing up for an expansion or a revamp of sorts. How's that going to look and what's motivating it?
What's motivating it was one day, again, out of a whim, I decided to see probably I would have said this about 5 years ago, to see what we've learned from our coverage since we started properly in 2012. What we've learned about the creativities in terms of value. And we took the basic Excel sheet and looked at all the news items we've covered, basically who's bought what, where, how, and why, and again, and as much as wherever possible, where a financial value has been cited. And before we knew it, this database was huge. It was massive. And before I knew it, in addition to publishing and consultancy, we're in danger of needing to become a technology company as well, because to access the database and look at the trends and the way the various sectors were involved in, and how investors in, say, fashion treated investment differently when it came to investing in architecture, or how different it was when they were investing in gaming, or what they had in common. So suddenly, since 4 or 5 years ago, we've continued building this database, and it is humongous. But rather than deciding that I don't know what to do with it, when this revamp takes place, it's going to be another core competency and brand, which we call MTF being for Meditainment Finance, MTF Monitor. And MTF Monitor will basically be an analytical tool. So if you are planning to invest in any of these sectors, we can not only give you a history of how people have put money in these sectors, whether it's through joint ventures, takeovers, outright acquisitions, new launches. We can also use that as the foundation for whatever it is you might need to develop your own businesses. And that's something that for us is new. I know there are a lot of analytical firms out there, but I will challenge them to see if they've got the granular version of what's going on financially in the creative industries, what we've got. So that's going to be brand new when the revamp takes place. And that, I suspect, will also influence not only what we do for clients in the consultancy side, but how we also continue to cover the news items, and how we also analyze the stories we write about.
That sounds like a very heavy but exciting project. Have you had to, hire developers or data scientists or anything like this? Has it been difficult to manage?
Oh, it's not been easy. It's not been easy, because bear in mind that in addition to, it's lovely to us having this chat today about this venture of mine and how it's growing. Meanwhile, there's a real life, and that can sometimes throw curveballs from anywhere. You're thinking, oh, okay, I've got to bring the publication out. I've got something to do for a client, and I'm stupid enough to actually say I'm going to launch something else like that. But then you take a step backwards, breathe in, breathe out, and you realize how exciting it is. You just think, oh, there's nothing like that I've seen anyway out there. And all I've just got to do. So yes, the idea now is that there was a time when basically I would attend a lot of events. One, to get new stories, and two, hopefully also new readers and clients. But now, forward going, yes, the idea will be looking for expertise. The reason why I haven't jumped, yes, a lot, but yes, to ask another question, yes, I am doing a lot of it myself. I have got, among the people who helped, it's two wonderful, brilliant-minded, Kirsty and Mark, who can step in when it comes to this database. So the three of us, sort of like working in a very primitive, basic version. But the next mission, yes, is to find someone who actually gets what we do, who gets what I thought was an interesting word, understands the philosophy of what we're doing. That, yes, it is a business. It involves money. I think we need to earn it, and it's right about money and finance. But as with all businesses, someone dealing with something like the database and the technological side of it will need to still be on the same page with us Because I can imagine meeting someone who's a tech expert who will immediately probably see it and have ideas that are probably beyond my understanding, which would be great and wonderful. But at the end of the day, first and foremost, it's about using that platform to understand the value of creativity. Like again, that is always the same, the value, financial value of creativity. If there are offshoots, developments, fine, but the basic, the foundation, we must not move away from that.
A lot of people feel, quite rightly, I think, that the publishing industry needs more innovation and it needs more entrepreneurship in order to, well, survive and thrive. So as somebody who's in many ways in this category, what is your advice if you had to give some key pieces of advice to entrepreneurially minded journalists and publishers?
Well, first and foremost, I would say, and again, this may sound like the bleeding obvious, but find something you believe in. Publishing, like a lot of other professions and industries, is a channel. What you put in that channel, either you give a great deal of, I'm just trying not to use a rude word, but you actually care about deeply. If you're going into it because you want to do enter publishing, it won't work for the simple reason, like a lot of things in real life, things can and will go wrong. It's not personal, it just is. And if it's the only thing you care about is the fact that you want to be able to tell your mates and your family that you're a publisher, when those hard times come along, it's almost impossible to sustain because you'll be one of millions, and who cares? But what you are writing about, what you're making movies, videos about, what you're creating blogs about, that topic, that theme, if you care about that, that will see you through a lot. Those hard times could be anything from a personal problem to a recession, which especially the last two just decimated not just businesses, but lives as well. And I can't emphasize that enough. So if you're going to publishing, first and foremost, find something you really care about. Secondly, make sure that if there's any money coming in from somewhere, it's covering another obvious thing, the roof over your head and the food you eat and your personal health and those around you, which makes publishing very expensive because now you've also got to find money to run the business itself. If you're able to find a way of basically covering that, then you have to figure out the technology. You cannot go into publishing today without understanding the technological development. And that ranges from the way you distribute your venture and how you reach your clients, readers, the consumers, and how you collect revenue. Now, the scary bit about today is that technological side is constantly developing. Whereas the topic you're writing about, you're publishing about, can be, you can define the parameters for that and be steady and stable about that. The technology that enables you to actually run the business is constantly changing. It's constantly being start and dropped. It's constantly being overhauled and made cheaply, and much cheaper than it's ever been. And that's where you need someone, either you, the person, the founder, yourself, or a second person who gets that, who's ready to say, we need to be making this change tomorrow. Or if you can't make the change tomorrow, you need to be getting ready for this in a week's time, and at the same time, run the business as it is now, but be ready to just leap in a few weeks, a few months, or the following year. That is crucial because unless that is smoothly run, it can create a disconnect between you and your targeted audience. And the moment that disconnection takes place, that's the game over. And because there's somebody else who'll step in, even if it's somebody else who's offering the same service for free. So be sure about what it is You want the sector, the topic, the industry, the theme that you want to focus on, as in the content, what you're creating to be published. And then you also need to figure out be on top of the technologies that you need in order to market and distribute that. It's unforgivable if you can't get those two aspects right. Yes, and when I mentioned earlier, the roof over the head and your health, don't underestimate that. And don't think that's just me being sensible, asking anyone to be sensible. It is fundamental. If you're going to ask for an investor, which again could be another solution, you and that investor, don't just take the money, make sure you're on the same page. It's complicated. It comes across on paper as one of the easiest sectors and industries to enter publishing, and especially digital publishing, because there are all these resources out there, but it is not. You need to know what you're doing, you need to know why you're doing it, and you need to know how you're going to do it. So think it through, not just a business plan, just think through about how your day is going to start, whether you're going to work 12 hours a day or just 2 hours a day. That's up to you. But pin that down before you start, you get going. And there's going to be a temptation. You're going to hear people go, oh, but why aren't you doing this? Because so-and-so is doing it and they're making millions. Well, that's fine if they're making millions indefinitely. If they make million 1 year and they're broke for the next 10 years, that million won't last, or chances are they just take the money and run. Is what I advise them to do. So yes, it doesn't matter that the fact the word digital is there and the word publishing is there. Know exactly what you're doing and why.
Thanks so much for sharing that with us. So just to wrap up, where can our listeners go to learn more about you, your business, and do you have any particular resources to recommend? I don't know, any favorite books, any favorite publications, sites, anything like this?
You can find out a lot from our social media sites. We are on Twitter. We are on LinkedIn especially. We do a lot on LinkedIn and also Facebook. So you'll find, and you can on Mediatainment, find a Mediatainment as a combination of media and entertainment. Mediatainment Finance, Tech Mutiny, tech as in technology, Mutiny, and then JK Media Inc. Usually we either JK Med, that's for historical reasons, but on our social media site. You can learn a lot. We do a lot of what we call, for us, is free stuff. Basically, make sure people are up to date with what's going on out there on social media. Then there is our website, of course, JK Media Inc., jkmediainc.com, mediatainmentfinance.com, techmutiny.net. So, and yes, they're not short and succinct, but that's deliberate, because the understanding is that if you really care about the creative industries, you'll find us. But once again, mediatainmentfinance.com, techmutiny.net, JK Media Inc., as in INC.com. When it comes to recommendations, it's always a bit difficult to just go for one particular platform or a book or anything like that. So my recommendation is this. Try and follow on social media. That's where I get a lot of my ideas. Companies that I think would be in the sectors I'm interested in. There's also a publication called Press Gazette. Their website does a lot on digital publishing that I recommend you read as well. There is, if you look under websites, anything to do with journalism, I would recommend that you have a go. Just to give yourself a kind of a debate, a conversation. There's nothing definitively perfect out there, but at least when you're reading them, it raises questions in your mind for when you have the next conversation with a human being. And then I'll also, as for mainly vanity purposes, I'll recommend that you read titles like Vanity Fair. I know that comes across as something that's a posh publication in a high-end, glossy magazine media. But apart from the excellent photography, which I'm keen on, they write a lot about what's going on. in the publishing industry, because they are covering what the big boys, the big guys are doing. And that includes both the successes and failures. And it's amazing what you can learn. It's amazing about what even the most experienced publishing companies, some of the fatal flaws that they suffer from which you as a startup can look at, read, and go, okay, I know this isn't for me. Or maybe it is for me, I just do it differently. I try not to recommend one specific thing because you want debates in your mind. You want to be able to read things. So again, try and look at the things on the journalism, on the websites, on Google. Look at Press Gazette has got a history, a long history, long before the internet, which is why I recommend that. It's a UK publication. And as I say, when it comes to the big stories, the way Vanity Fair covers media is absolutely spot on. And then there are the trade titles like, Hollywood Reporter and Billboard. They cover the finance and the business side of the creative industry. So if you want to cover those, for instance, find the trade publications of the sector you're interested in. Mainly because that has evolved. All the trade publications, they're no longer just a boring what machineries are doing in factories. They cover a lot of developments that the established business publications may not have the space or the time to do. So I hope that's clear enough. Try and find what you want to do. Go on Google and find publications that are dealing with it. Always helpful.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us today. I really enjoyed this interview.
Thank you so much for giving me time to just talk about things I've been thinking about for ages. It's been a brilliant opportunity, and I really appreciate the excellent questions because it made me think things through as well.
I really appreciate the excellent answers. Julia Corentin, ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Thanks for listening, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the show. Check out those resources that Juliana recommended at the end. Follow her on social. You can also follow us on social. That's at MobiLoud app on Twitter. Also, check out the Digital Media Growth blog where I publish articles based on all of these interviews. That's mobiloud.com/blog. If you're interested in entrepreneurial publishing, you might also like to check out episode 8. That's with Jeremy Kaplan. He's a very interesting academic who focuses on this area specifically. And please subscribe for more interviews with fascinating people from the publishing industry. See you next time, and thanks for listening. Bye-bye.